On this episode of Locked On Jayhawks, Kansas gets a huge boost to the offensive line. Bryce Foster coming back for another year. Plus, is Kansas going to get a new kicker? And a little update from Bill Self on Shakeel Moore.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening? Derek Johnson here. We got a bonus episode of Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to everydayers catching each and every episode. And if you've already caught our episode from earlier today, thank you to you. We'll have a KU-NC State preview coming at you tomorrow. And thank you wherever you listen to the show, anywhere you get your podcasts or on YouTube. So on today's episode, this little bonus show, Bryce Foster announced earlier today. He's going to be coming back for another year in Lawrence. We're going to get into that. Also, KU may be picking up some steam with a transfer kicker that is pretty interesting in Laith Marjan. So we'll discuss that, and then we'll finish things up with a little on Bill Self discussing a little bit about Shakeel Moore. So let's start here with Bryce Foster. Foster was the starting center for KU football this past season, and he had a chance to go pro if he wanted to. I think he would have been drafted if he decided to go into the NFL draft. He was somebody that was seen as having, pro potential before he transferred in to Lawrence, and I think he had himself a really good season, enough that if he would have got drafted. Now, the center position is one of those that it doesn't get drafted as high in general, so maybe he's looking at a day 3 pick. But it's a big deal to have him back. It's a big deal to have a future pro player who was all-conference level player for you back for another season in 2025. And as you look at it, not a ton of starters returning for KU. You have Jalen Daniels back in tow. Now you have Bryce Foster. You have Kobe Baines back in tow, but that's 3 returning starters. That's it, right? So important to get as much as you can. And he was one of KU's best offensive linemen. Obviously, being the center, you're kind of the leader of that line. And, having a guy back in the system and everything is so important. He is 6'5", 330 pounds. He's a mountain of a man. If you don't remember the story, he was a big-time recruit out of high school, goes to Texas A&M, starts right away as a true freshman, plays a ton of football for them for 3 years, transfers in the summer to Lawrence, and was an absolute home run addition. And I think the most interesting part to me is that a lot of times the guys who transfer in post spring ball in the summer, there is a bit of a catching up process during the offseason, during fall camp. And I think, there probably was a little bit of a catching up for Bryce Foster during the way. But, we've seen guys who joined during the summer before, and maybe they don't have as good of a season as you might have hoped based on their previous, accolades or stats or whatever it was. Foster translated and then some. He had a really good season for KU. He wound up all Big 12 second team. And he had a Pro Football Focus grade of 74.7, which was put together with a 73.8 run blocking grade and a 68.2 pass blocking grade. He allowed just 7 pressures all season long. So he was awesome. He's played over 2,500 snaps in his career. He's played a litany of games. I'd imagine part of the reason wanting to return isn't just wanting to, come back for KU football and help push this team back to bowl eligibility next season. We talked about this a lot when he was being recruited by KU. He wanted to be a 2-sport guy. He wanted to not just play football, but he wanted to be a thrower in track and field. And if he goes off to the NFL, that coincides with the timing there that he wouldn't really get to do the track and field thing. So he gets one final season now of track and field, assuming that he'll come back for another season of football and then go to the NFL draft after that. And so I think it made sense from that perspective, but you would have understood if he did decide to go pro because he did have that pro potential. But it's huge to have him back. It's huge to have Jalen Daniels back. And now, this is a very important piece on the offensive line, because if Bryce Foster doesn't come back, the short answer to this is it'd probably be somebody from the transfer portal, but you would start worrying yourself about who's going to be the starting center next season, because you already lost Dre Dorian, who he goes off to like the CFL draft and stuff. You are bringing in Anderson Kopp, who might profile as a center, but he's going to be a true freshman. And then you have Amir Herring from Michigan, but I don't know. Does he profile more as a guard? Does he profile more as a center? So you would be scrambling in the transfer portal to bring in a starter. You would probably be scrambling in the transfer portal to bring in somebody for depth. So now you don't have to worry about that as much. That's huge. And now it basically gives you 2.5, I guess you could say, returning starters on the offensive line. I say 2.5 because, okay, Kobe Baines and Bryce Foster. And then Calvin Clements would be the other one. Clements wasn't a full-time starter. That belonged to Logan Brown and Bryce Cabledew. Year before that, it belonged to Dom Pooney and Bryce Cabledew. But we've seen Calvin Clements start football games when Logan Brown, or play in football games, have to rotate in, right? If Logan Brown was hurt, or with Bryce Cabledew going down for a little bit. If the bowl game, Dom Pooney opts out, and at that point Logan Brown was out for the year last season with an injury. So you've ended up with Calvin Clements starting games and getting real game action, rotational action, going in for somebody who's hurt, that it becomes like 2.5 starters back. And that makes it a lot easier when you're looking at offensive line construction. It makes it a lot easier in the portal that you only have to target a couple positions, that you only have to target, okay, we need maybe a starter or two, like maybe we're comfortable with Nolan Gorchika being the other starter, one of these guys making a big step this year, Amir Herring, whoever it is, right? But maybe now in the portal, instead of being like, we need this, and this, it's we need this and this, right? And that can be a little bit easier. That can be a little bit easier, sure, on your budget, you would think. And it just makes things a lot better there. And obviously, when you're talking about best centers in the Big 12, he was all Big 12 second team this season. He's going to be in the running for being the best center in the conference in 2025. So, of course, it is a big deal for him to come back. All right, Kansas might have a new kicker, question mark. We get to that next. This is Locked On Jayhawks. This episode of the show is brought to you by Game Time, which is a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And with Game Time ticket coverage, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. So there's been some scuttlebutt, some rumors, some crystal ball picks on 24/7 Sports with KU landing a kicker out of the transfer portal. You know, it's funny. It feels like there's 2 new offers every hour that you might see on social media, that you might see on a recruiting website or something that the KU is sending out. And that's just the nature of the business right now in the transfer portal for teams across the country. But I hadn't seen this one, but then some crystal ball picks popped up on 24/7 Sports. The name is Laith Marjan. I don't know if that's the right way to pronounce it. Marjan, maybe. So he was originally at East Carolina. Then he transfers to South Alabama and ends up becoming the starting kicker. Didn't really kick it at East Carolina. And he would be a redshirt senior in 2025, so you'd have 1 year left of play. KU brings him on. It'd be similar to when they brought on Seth Keller for 1 year of play. Obviously, you lose Tabor Allen if you're Kansas, who, Tabor Allen, I don't think was it's not like somebody who was hitting like 55-yard field goals for you, but he had a very solid season. He was 12 of 15 kicking. He had a long of 47. I don't think KU was super comfortable with him taking field goals, 40 yards or longer. And a lot of those, the field goal percentage does look really good. A lot of those were like shorter field goals. If you just look at the ones like 30 yards and be long, or 30 yards and longer, 35 and longer, 40 and longer, it's maybe not quite as good. So he was a solid enough kicker for this year, but there's a difference between being a solid kicker and being a weapon at the kicker position. And I think if you do end up landing Marjan, that's what you're getting. He went 16 of 17 on field goals this past season. He was 42 of 44 on PATs. So that's kind of weird when you have a guy who has more missed PATs than field goals. Like, was that just they got blocked, or I don't know exactly. But he was 4 for 4 inside the 30-yard line. He was 6 for 6 from 30 to 39 yards. He was 6 for 6 from 40 to 49 yards, and he had a long of 49 yards. His lone miss on the season was a 50-plus yarder. So this is a really good kicker that would be brought into the program, and obviously, it would be very helpful for KU. Lance Leipold's not the most aggressive on fourth down. You look at the last couple of years, KU has been near the bottom or at the bottom of the Big 12 in fourth down attempts. So you need to invest in a good kicker if that is what you're going to do, and it seems like they'd be doing just that. All right, let's finish up some other news. This from the hardwood. Bill Self gave a little bit of an update on Shakeel Moore. We get to that next on Locked On Jayhawks. This episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, where you can get in on the action for KUNC State this Saturday. Get ready to tackle the NFL action as well with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, thanks for joining us here on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks, and we have our KUNC State preview coming at you on tomorrow's episode, so you can check that out anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. Bill Self spoke with the media and kind of gave a bit of an update. I mean, he kind of talked about, some stuff, and he said that they had a good practice yesterday and that, it's been good that they've had this kind of schedule to have this time off in between games and everything. He also gave it an update on Shakeel Moore and kind of said that, he's kind of back to like practicing, and I don't know that we're expecting him to play on Saturday. I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but we could use him back in the long term. There's been some rumors kind of going around about what exactly is going on here. Is Shakeel Moore just, upset with whatever, or at this point he just wants to, take a medical red shirt? Is he going to transfer away from the program at some point? What is going to happen here? That might be good news from Bill Self. It still was vague enough that it could be open to all sorts of things happening. Maybe they're able to figure out if there is anything happening. Maybe it is just all the injury. I don't know. Here's what I do know. If Kansas has an opportunity to get Shakeel Moore back into the lineup, back into the rotation, they need to explore that option to do so. And it's easy to say now, Kansas coming off 2 losses on the road. They're at their low point at this point of the season. But you look at this Kansas team, and don't you think they could use some more athleticism? Don't you think they could use some more bounce off the dribble from a quick athletic guard who can get his own bucket? Don't you think they could use a really good defensive guard? I mean, you could argue he is their best defensive guard. I know you have DeJuan Harris, but different types of defenders maybe. But he'd be up there, right? I look at it for Kansas, and I think it'd be really fun. And even when we did see him, it was limited minutes. I don't think that was necessarily indicative of how Bill Self views him as a player. I think that's just where he was coming back from the injury, and you have all these players you're trying to play. But with KU's struggles, I have a hard time thinking that if he is fully healthy and good to go, that he would not be one of KU's 7 or 8 best players on the floor, and that he would not add a really good element that this team could use more of if he was on the court. So if they can get him back in any way, I think that'd be big, and we'll see what ends up happening there because, certainly the rumors are flying. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. We'll be back tomorrow with a KUNC State preview. See you then.